Chapter 6, Sword Art 2. Gasp, gasp, gasp. With bloodshot eyes, I continued going down the rope. I don't know how long I had been down here, but I presume at least 2 days had passed since I started going down. My hands, which were riddled with blisters, started bleeding all over the rope, leaving behind a red trail during my descent. My muscles spasmed every minute, making me almost lose grip of the rope on a couple of occasions. It felt as if I had gone back to the past, where I would monotonously be typing on the keyboard with no sense of purpose. I just kept going and going and going, until my sense of time and reason left my body. Even the pain slowly subsided, making it seem as if I was a robot. Sadly, like any other powered object, robots tend to run out of batteries. And that's precisely what happened to me. My vision grew blurry and my hands slowly lost grip of the rope. It seems like I have died again, huh? Oddly enough, it didn't feel the same as my first death, where I only felt endless coldness and loneliness. This time a warm sensation enveloped my body, making me feel extremely comfortable. It felt as if I was back in my mother's womb under the constant nourishment and protection of my mother. It didn't feel bad. Dong. 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 Suddenly I heard the loud sound of a bell tolling, causing my mind to spin and my eyes to shoot wide open. What just happened? Abruptly sitting up straight, I found my body drenched in sweat. Touching my body in a daze, I noticed I was on top of a small bed with the bed sheets damp from my sweat. Looking at my hands, I couldn't see any trace of the previous gruesome scene from when I was climbing down the rope. Glancing around, I finally took notice of my surroundings. I was inside a small room with what seemed to be a Japanese tatami-style floor. The room was rather empty, and aside from a small tea table and a large ancient clock that constantly tolled in the corner of the room, there was no other furniture. "You up, kid?" "Huh?" Snapping my head to the right, where the voice was coming from, a middle-aged man sat next to the tea table preparing some tea. His carefree movements and his calm demeanor when preparing the tea blended with the tranquil surroundings. The aroma coming from the tea filled the entire room, prompting me to momentarily relax. But not for long, as I immediately jumped out of the bed and warily looked at the stranger before me. Jet black hair, deep black eyes, and a stern but yet kind-looking face. "Relax, kid, I'm not gonna do anything to you." "Who are you?" I warily asked, without letting my guard down. If not for the fact that I was sure that he was not there when I was previously checking the room, I wouldn't have been as wary as I was now. A master. He was definitely a master beyond my level. Only someone who was leagues above my level could suddenly appear out of thin air without me noticing. Smacking his fist in his hand, as if he was reminded of something, the stern-looking middle-aged man looked at me and spoke. That's right. I haven't introduced myself yet, have I?" Lightly smiling, he extended his right hand towards my direction. "A pleasure to meet you, kid. My name is Toshimoto Keiki." Instantly my pupils dilated, and my mouth went slack. "But how? Aren't you already dead?" My speech stuttered and my body trembled as I looked at the man before me in shock. "Hey, kid, don't be like that." Laughing bitterly at my reaction, Grandmaster Keiki calmly put down the teapot and blew on the teacup in his hand. Yes, technically I could be considered to be dead, but someone intruded my home, waking up the remnant soul I left behind when I passed away. Our remnant soul. Once an expert reached a certain rank, they could learn an ancient Chinese technique known as soul division. Its main purpose was to split a soul and attach it to an object, allowing a person to for a short moment of time interact with the initiator of the technique. To better summarize the technique, it was basically a live recording that you could interact with. It had no attack power, and apart from inheriting the memories of the initiator, had no other feature. Knowing this, I managed to put the two and two together and managed to recompose myself. Cough, sorry about that. Amused by my odd behavior, Grandmaster Keiki laughed out loud and said, No worries, no worries. I had expected this kind of reaction to happen once someone found my resting place. Ren. Excuse me? Confused. Grandmaster Keiki raised his eyebrow and looked at me, who was reaching for his hand. My name is Ren. Ren Dover.
Ah.
That's right. How rude of me, I still had not asked for your name. A pleasure to meet you, Ren. Gripping my hand, we both looked at each other and shook our hands. Please sit down. Gesturing for me to sit down next to the tea table, Grandmaster Keiki took the porcelain teapot and dumped the contents that were in it. Green or black? Let's go with green. Smiling lightly, Grandmaster Keiki added the tea leaves to the brewing vessel and slowly poured hot water inside of the vessel to let the leaves soak and steep in the pot. As he was watching the water slowly darkening, Grandmaster Keiki let out a sad sigh and a nostalgic look appeared on his face. You know, I was once young and foolish like you. Back in my time, I lived in a country known as Japan. It was one of the most beautiful places in the world. It had tall and beautiful mountains, pink-dyed springs which were due to the sakura blossoming, wonderful food, and mesmerizing star-filled skies. Some even went as far as calling it paradise on earth. Seeing Grandmaster Keiki reminisce about his past, I immediately sat up straight and paid close attention to what he was saying. More than me wanting to know more about his past, which I already knew, I paid my full-hearted attention to him because of my respect for him. Though he may have been a fictional character that I had created, that was then and this was now. He was no longer a fictional character, and this world was no longer a novel. This was real, and the man before me was Grandmaster Keiki, a legendary warrior that sacrificed his life for the safety of millions. Looking up at the room's ceiling as he was reminiscing his past, Grandmaster Keiki let out a sad and tragic smile. Prior to the disaster, I had a beautiful wife and daughter. Back then I worked as a kendo instructor, and although I did not earn much, I was happy. It was a simple but yet fulfilling life. But then it hit us out of nowhere. Massive earthquakes engulfed Japan, creating tsunamis everywhere. It was total chaos as people were killed and homes were lost. The world that we once knew started to crumble. Fortunately, at the time when this was happening, my wife and daughter were traveling on a plane with me outside of Japan, and thus we were relatively unaffected by the catastrophe, but suddenly Grandmaster Keiki clenched the teacup he was holding tightly, as his face burned with pure rage. Then the second calamity happened. Taking a huge breath, he tried to calm himself down before continuing his speech. Huge black creatures with bat-like wings and sharp horns emerged from the mysterious gates that appeared all over the world. At first, they didn't do anything, they just stood in the air and calmly observed us like some kind of mice inside of a lab. To this day I still remember their arrogant eyes and creepy smiles that took pleasure in our despair. With his hands trembling, Grandmaster Keiki looked directly at me. Though he was supposed to be a remnant consciousness, I could still vividly see the sadness and anguish hidden deep within his eyes, as crystalline tears flowed down his wrinkly face. As soon as they deemed us weak, his teacup, which was already shaking, shook ever more fiercely, and his expression, which was previously still stoic, completely crumbled as more tears started streaming down his face. Hey, tok my wife and daughter from me. With his body trembling, Grandmaster Keiki, no, Tashimoto Keiki, both a father and husband, let the tears stream down his face as he mourned for the death of his loved ones. Watching the frail-looking man break down in front of me, I chose to remain silent and patiently waited for him to calm down. A slight tinge of pain hit my chest, as a part of me felt responsible for this man's tragedy. Wiping his eyes, Grandmaster Keiki stood up and calmly walked towards me. Sorry you had to see that. No, I understand. I shook my head and got up as well. Staring at each other eye to eye for a couple of seconds, Grandmaster Keiki suddenly smiled and patted my shoulder. Good, it seems that my luck isn't too bad. Walking past me, he slid the shoji, Japanese-style door, and walked outside the room as he gestured me to follow along. Follow me. As soon as I left the room I was left flabbergasted. An inexplicably beautiful garden stood before me. I felt a sudden loss of breath as I stood there blankly, mesmerized by the scene. Tack. 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 Lush green plants vibrantly covered the surroundings of the garden, and in the middle of it appeared a large transparent pond where koi fish of multiple different sizes freely swam in it. Birds freely roamed and chirped around the cloudless blue sky, and occasionally you would hear the repetitive yet relaxing sound of the bamboo fountain planted in the garden. The more I walked around the garden, the more I was left mesmerized by the surroundings. Approaching the pond, I could see different colored koi fish which ranged from red and white, slightly peeking the surface of the water almost as if they were aware of our presence. In the middle of the pond stood a small island connected by a small wooden bridge. Walking across the bridge, once again my breath was taken away. A miniature stylized landscape through which rocks, water features, and moss was neatly composed and surrounded by gravel which was raked to resemble ripples in water, appeared in my line of sight. A Zen garden. It's nice, isn't it? Sitting comfortably near the Zen garden, Grandmaster Keiki waved his hand urging me to sit down next to him. It truly is. I replied as I sat down on the ground beside him. Silence enveloped us as we both calmly stared at the Zen garden before us. It was strange but yet relaxing at the same time. You know, I was really surprised when I first saw you. The first to disrupt the silence was Grandmaster Keiki, who with a smile plastered on his face continued to look at the garden before him. Ever since my death, no one had ever been to this place, and rightfully so, as I made sure to hide this place from the prying eyes of those greedy bastards. Of course, even if they did find this place out of pure luck, I made sure they wouldn't be able to enter. I'm sure you know that the rope was a test, right? With a smile on his face, Grandmaster Keiki glanced at me, which made me recall the traumatizing experience I had gone through before. Of course, I know. I'm still being haunted by the rope to this day. I cursed inwardly as I smiled and nodded. Yes, I remember. Kukuku, you're so easy to read, kid. Laughing out loud, Grandmaster Keiki continued, you see, I put that rope there as a test to determine if someone was worthy of waking up my soul. If you had climbed down but quit after an hour, you would have never been able to find this place. Even if you spent a day going down the rope, you would have never been able to come here. Once you are able to firmly go down the rope for 2 days without falling, only then will you have the right to have an audience with me. Looking at Grandmaster Keiki, I could faintly see a trace of admiration in his eyes as he looked at me. 4 days, 3 hours, 22 minutes, and 41 seconds. That's how long you've been going down the rope. Even as a remnant soul, I was shocked by your sheer determination. I kept smiling, but my eyelid couldn't help but twitch at his statement. Of course I kept going down, it's not like I wanted to die after just being reincarnated. Even if you kept going because you wanted to live on, that still counts as determination. Moreover, you were never gonna die in the first place, as it was just an illusion. Seemingly having read my thoughts again, Grandmaster Keiki lightly chuckled, causing me to smile in embarrassment. Getting back on the topic, the reason why I created the rope test was to determine if someone is worthy enough to inherit my sword art. Someone with no determination can never hope of inheriting my Keiki style. The Kiku style is a sword art that focuses on monotonous but perfect slashes. If someone cannot practice the same monotonous motion like swinging the sword in the same direction for more than half a day straight, they are not worthy. Standing up, Grandmaster Keiki walked across the bridge and stopped before a tree. Placing his hand on the sheath of his katana, he took a deep breath. Soon after, his figure slowly blended with the surrounding scenery, making it seem as if he was one with nature. Rustle. Out of nowhere, a small gust of wind passed by, causing a couple of leaves to fall from the tree. The leaves which were blown away by the wind slowly descended near where Grandmaster Keiki was. Click! All I heard was a clicking sound before all the leaves around Grandmaster Keiki split into 8 identical pieces, causing my jaw to drop into an O shape. Click! With another click, the katana that seemed to have never left the scabbard returned to its original position. The Keiki style is the art of perfection. When you manage to repeat the same motion every time with no margin of error, that is when you will have finally mastered the Keiki style. Closing my eyes, I tried to keep my composure. My heart was beating like crazy, and my blood boiled. That was insane. Holy.
Shh.
*T. How in the world did he even manage to cut those leaves so perfectly without even moving? I want to do that too. Looking at Ren's sparkling eyes, Grandmaster Keiki let out a chuckle. Do you wish to learn? Disrupting me from my thoughts was Grandmaster Keiki's stern voice. Yes. Without a second thought, I nodded my head enthusiastically. I was waiting for this moment. Very well. Seemingly having made his decision, Grandmaster Keiki peacefully smiled. Slowly he walked up to me and tapped my forehead. Immediately I felt my mind turn blank as a flood of information rushed into my mind. Watching me getting overwhelmed by the information, Grandmaster Keiki smiled as his body slowly became more and more transparent. By the time I managed to sort out all of the information inside of my brain, Grandmaster Keiki was already almost fully transparent. Startled, I immediately got on my knees and paid my respects. Thank you. Thank you. I will make sure to carry on your art and spread your name across the world. Grandmaster Keiki let out another smile, as he mumbled something inaudible before he disappeared and scattered into light fragments. Nodding resolutely, I stood up. Though his last words may have been inaudible, I could already tell what he wanted to say. Keep low until you're strong enough. Letting out a deep breath, I took one last look at the surroundings and engraved the scenery inside of my head. Paying one last respect, I quickly walked towards where the exit was. I know. Chapter 7, Lock 1. Staring at the door to the classroom, I sighed. A25. The letter A stood for the floor level, which went from A to E, and the number 25 referred to the classroom number. There was a reason for my sigh. I knew this class. Of course, I knew this classroom. This was the classroom where the protagonist and the other main characters stayed for half of the novel. Many schemes and plots from jealous rivals and competitors happened in this class. Regardless of how much I didn't want to be involved with the main cast, now that I found myself in this class, I would most likely be swept regardless of my will. Yo, you going in or not? Waking me up from my thoughts was a rough feminine voice. Slowly turning my head, I momentarily fell into a daze. Beautiful would have been an understatement in this case. Standing right before me was a young girl with short brown hair. She had crystal blue eyes, a small but not too small nose, and a well-proportioned face. Her white skin that did not have any gaps, accompanied by her beautiful doll-like appearance, made anyone who looked at her lose themselves in her beauty. She had a well-developed body, where everything that should have developed was developed, and her elegant yet slightly arrogant demeanor added more to her charm. Currently, her cherry-red lips were parted in an annoyed pout as she stared at me in annoyance. Move it. Seeing that I was dumbly staring at her, she shoved me to the side in annoyance and entered the classroom. Letting out a bitter smile, I shook my head. That's Emma for you. One of the main heroines of the novel. Emma Rochefield, daughter of Ashton City's mayor, who was also the vice director of the Union, an S-rank warrior. One of the most powerful people in the human domain right now. When I was designing her character, I made her into a tomboyish style character. She was sometimes rude and impatient, but oftentimes she was kind, making her one of my readers' favorite characters. For real though, I did expect her to be beautiful, but the moment I laid eyes on her I was stunned by her otherworldly beauty. Not even in my previous world did I ever see someone so beautiful. Watching her figure enter the classroom, I couldn't help but express my admiration for her. Even famous actresses that I saw on TV would feel ashamed if they stood next to each other. It took me a couple of seconds to collect myself before bitterly smiling. What was wrong with me? A 32-year-old man getting mesmerized by a 16-year-old kid? I'm starting to sympathize with all the Isekai protagonists out there who experience the same thing. Since I was reincarnated into a younger body, which was still in its teens, I couldn't help but feel something when looking at the extremely beautiful Emma. I think the biggest misconception that readers have regarding Isekai protagonists was how they assumed that just because they were mentally old that they should no longer have any desires. You have to take note that older people are not some sages who have no sexual desires. In fact, the only reason their sexual desires decreased over time was because of their aging bodies. It had nothing to do with their mentality. So put yourself in my shoes, who was reincarnated into a body raging with hormones. My reaction was totally understandable. Still, this doesn't mean I was actually in love with Emma. I was just stunned by how beautiful she was. I mean, for one, she's 16, so that in itself was a no-go for me, and secondly, she's one of the main protagonists who later falls in love with the protagonist. Why would she be attracted to someone like me who has no redeeming quality? Hoo. After collecting my breath, I slowly opened the door and entered the classroom. Looking at the classroom, I couldn't help but notice how spotless it was, as it almost looked like it was sparkling. The classroom was split into 2 descending rows, and each row had a retractable seat that one could sit on. Where should I sit? As I looked around the classroom for a place to sit, my attention was instantly drawn towards 2 individuals. Haughtily sitting on the last row on the right was a blonde youth with clear green eyes and a dignified face. His slightly long hair gently rested on top of his broad shoulders, and his perfectly masculine jawline seemed as if it was chiseled by a sculptor. From time to time you could see girls secretly taking peeks at his handsome face as they shyly blushed and turned their heads away whenever their eyes met. Jean Horton. The protagonist's rival. Descendant of the Horton family that currently owned a majority stake of the second largest guild in the human domain, Starlight Guild. You could definitely tell he was one of those typical arrogant young master-type characters. I thought as I looked at him from the corner of my eye. His condescending attitude that made people feel like they were below him could be vividly seen by the way he looked down on almost everyone in the class. Born with a silver spoon, and provided with whatever he desired, it was almost inevitable for his character to become like that. But don't get me wrong, although he had the vibe of a villain, he was actually part of the good guys. It was only after I made some adjustments to his character that he started becoming a fan favorite. He may be a villain now, but later as the story progresses and his character goes through a series of hurdles, he starts to mature and slowly becomes more bearable to stay with. Just as he attracted most of the girls' attention, seated in front of him was a slender beauty that matched Emma's looks and attracted the majority of the boys' gazes. Her sleek black hair, which was randomly restricted by a small hairpin, gathered at her waist. Her exquisite small face that was devoid of any makeup, displayed an image of natural beauty and innocence that made anyone that was near her have an urge to protect her. Ignoring everyone that was trying to talk to her, the young girl focused on her book. She had a cold and aloof air around her that made her extremely hard to approach. Amanda Stern. Daughter of Edward Stern. Guildmaster of Demon Hunter Guild, the current #1 guild in the human domain. Like Jean, she was also born with a silver spoon, but unlike him, she did not become haughty. In fact, she was quite the opposite of Jean, well-mannered, intelligent, and oftentimes kind. Whenever the protagonist would get in trouble, she would always find ways to help him. If I had to point out a flaw about her though, it would be the fact that she was cold. Very cold. Born in such a prestigious family, she had no choice but to learn and suffer all the schemes that were directed at her family. Oftentimes she would be targeted by other guilds or organizations so that they could use her as leverage. As she was constantly exposed to such schemes and ploys, she was left with no choice but to mature earlier than normal people, thus giving rise to her cold character. Seeing how aloof she was, I shook my head and looked for a seat. Glancing around a couple of seconds, I decided to sit down on the second row on the left, as far away from the main characters as possible. There was no way I was going to interact with them. I'm just gonna sit here like a proper mob and pretend to be air. Why? Simple. The main characters were literal calamity magnets. Whatever could go wrong will go wrong if you were with them. Like hell am I going to bother getting close to them? I'm here to live, not to die. Well, even if I did try to interact with them in the most likely scenario, I would most likely be ignored. Currently, it was 7:30 a.m. and class began at 8 o'clock. Seeing that I had 30 minutes to spare before class started, I rested my head on my arms and closed my eyes. I had actually arrived at the academy an hour ago. By the time I had come back from the Clayton Ridge, it was already 6:45 a.m. and as I couldn't skip class, I took a quick shower, put on my new uniform, and hurriedly made my way towards class. I was honestly exhausted. I did not sleep for almost 24 hours, and to be honest, I don't even know if I could even manage to keep my eyes open during class. Fortunately, today was orientation day, so they shouldn't be talking much, which sits well with me. Attention! As I was soundly sleeping on the desk, a loud voice echoed across the classroom, waking me up. When I opened my eyes, the instructor stood behind the podium as she looked at the class. Today is your first day, so there won't be anything special planned, but I sure hope you haven't slacked off during the short interval where you were accepted here. How do you expect to graduate from this place if you can't be diligent? Bam! Slapping her hand on the table, a small shockwave spread across the classroom. Apart from Emma, Jean, Amanda, and a couple of other students, everyone in the classroom was pushed back, I included. There will be no slacking off in my classroom. Scanning the whole classroom, her eyes briefly paused on Emma, Jean, and Amanda, and the few others that managed to withstand her shockwave. If one looked closely, you could see traces of satisfaction on her face as she looked at them. Placing both hands on the podium, she looked at the classroom. Now, let's start with the self-introductions. I'm Donna Longburn, your personal instructor for this year and possibly future years. That name, I knew it. Of course, I knew it. She was one of the characters which I spent the most time designing. She looked exactly how I imagined. The Calamity Witch, Donna Longburn. I muttered as I tried to suppress my raging heartbeat. Her black hair gently cascaded along her shoulders, stopping right above her raised butt that reminded one of a fully ripe peach. Her tempting figure that could cause any man to go insane drew the ire of every boy in the class, causing their hearts to boil. But what truly stood out the most about her was not her figure, but her beautiful violet eyes that made one lose themselves if they looked at them for too long. Ever since young, she practiced an extremely rare enchantress art, which caused her to become extremely seductive to the opposite gender, as well as demons. What made her especially fearsome was that she could completely tip the scale of a battlefield by turning allies against each other. Currently, she was only 28, which was quite young considering that now the people lived for up to 200 years of age, more than double than before, prior to the cataclysm. Every one of her movements was extremely alluring, and if she wanted to, she could turn any man in the classroom a puppet of her will. Even now, as she stood in front of the podium, her every movement attracted the gaze of every male in the classroom. Even Jean wasn't an exception as his face became red. What about me? I popped a boner. Fortunately for me, I hid it well and no one could see it, or else I would have died of humiliation. Couldn't help it. She was literally the incarnation of my sexual desires. Of course, I wouldn't be as stupid as to hit on her. Not only was she strong, but she was actually an S-rank member of the Union, and ranked 156th on the hero ranking. Moreover, she had her fair share of suitors. Hitting on her was like asking to be killed. I'm sure I don't have to say more, as most of you may already know about me. Donna calmly spoke as she looked around the classroom. She seemed to have gotten used to the boys' reactions, as she feigned ignorance to their reddening faces. As it is your first day, I won't take too much of your time. I can already see some people who look exhausted in the classroom. Perhaps they did not sleep enough because they were too excited, or they trained all night, so I'll make this first session short. An angel. She was an angel sent by the Heaves. I had sinned. How could I have possibly had such devious thoughts about such an angel? She could even tell how exhausted I was and was trying to be considerate of me and the others. Amit Ba. I am one with the sky. All right, first things first, let's take attendance. Taking out a small tablet, she quickly called out names. Rank 1750, Rindover. Hearing my name, I enthusiastically raised my hand and said, "Present." Nodding, she continued. Rank 1232, Troy Morrison. Present. Rank 845, Julius Halfwing. Present. She was totally reading in ascending order, wasn't she? As she read the names on the list, I couldn't help but notice the rank getting smaller each time a new name was called. And it just so happens that I was the first person she called, suggesting that I was the weakest person in the class. I should have realized before. Letting out a sigh, I slumped on the table and quietly waited for her to finish reading out the names. Rank 15, Emma Rochfield. Present. Rank 12, Timothy Bartman. Present. Rank 8, Amanda Stern. Present. Rank 5, Han Yufei. Present. Rank 3, Jean Horton. Present. Rank 2, Melissa Hall. Present. Rank 1, Kevin Voss. Rank 1, Kevin Voss. Raising her brow, Donna looked around the classroom and asked once again, "Is Rank 1 Kevin Voss in the classroom?" Absolute silence. Not even a pin could be heard. Everyone looked around, but they all shook their head. Looking at her tablet, Donna frowned. Just as she was about to cross Kevin's name off the list, the door to the classroom slowly opened. Soon a figure walked out, and instantly the whole room's attention was on him. Short black hair, deep red eyes, muscular jawline, and well-built body. His entire presence and aura were like that of a newly forged sword straight from the furnace, with keen and sharp edges that threatened to cut anything that obstructed its path. His looks, which rivaled that of Jean Horton, who could have been regarded as one of the most handsome individuals in the whole academy, instantly drew the attention of most of the girls in the class. Pardon for my tardiness. I had a slight accident before coming here, hence I was not able to make it in time. Taking a small bow, his eyes never drifted away from Donna's eyes. Taking a quick look at Kevin, Donna couldn't help but be stunned at his indifferent attitude towards her, who practiced an extremely potent 4-star seductive art. Interesting. Letting out a small grin, she nodded. Very well, find a spot and sit down. Thank you. Nodding his head, Kevin made his way towards the first row on the right side of the classroom and sat down. Hoo. Letting out a long sigh, I bitterly shook my head. That's the protagonist for you. Whatever he does, no one would find fault against him, as he was both handsome and capable. The world just wasn't fair. If I had been the one who had arrived late, I would have probably been burned alive by now. As a mob, you just don't get the same privileges the protagonist gets. Chapter 8, Lock 2. Arriving in front of a large room, Donna, who stood in front of everyone, turned on the lights and said, "There's a wide selection of weapons here, so feel free to choose what you deem to be the best fit for you." A large room appeared before everyone, and the diversity of weapons present here left me speechless. From nunchucks to broadswords. All sorts of weapons that were neatly laid out according to their size were being displayed before us. I was honestly impressed. There were so many of them that I couldn't even tell what some of the weapons were. I'd be very careful if I were you. If you damage any weapon present, you better be ready to pay up to 500,000 U. Staring at the excited expression of the students in the class, Donna immediately poured cold water on them as she pointed out the price of each weapon. Some students couldn't help but flinch as they started looking at the weapons like they were some sort of divine artifact. I advise using a weapon that is suitable for you so that you don't risk damaging the weapon. Experimenting is good, but that is only if you can afford it. Looking at the 200 or so students before her, Donna cheerfully smiled and continued, "Before taking a weapon, swipe your student card so that you can register your name on the database. After that, take your weapon and meet me in the main practice area." Having finished what she wanted to say, Donna turned around and left. As soon as her figure wasn't visible anymore, everyone started talking excitedly. Especially the boys. "Wow, that was the Calamity Witch? She's so hot. Oh my god, I think I've fallen in love. PFFF. You wish someone like her would never like a loser like you. Wanna fight?" Scenes like these happened everywhere as the students had already formed their own clique. I, as the lowest ranked member, am obviously excluded from them. And to be honest, it was exactly what I wished for, as I don't want to spend my time licking someone's ass. In the lock, the hierarchical system ruled the academy. Just like the relationship of a peasant and a noble. Only those who were ranked higher had the right to be treated as nobles. Low rankers like me were merely people who would later become cannon fodder when fighting on the front lines. Such was my life now, as the lowest rank in the class. Contrary to me, who was all alone. The main characters were surrounded by a crowd of people. Kevin, Jean, Amanda, Emma, and Melissa all had people swarming around them. Apart from Kevin, the rest were already used to such situations and thus were able to remain indifferent towards the waves of flattery coming from every person's mouth. But for Kevin, who was not used to such a situation, found himself completely helpless. His previous demeanor, which caused one to respect him, completely crumbled as he struggled to get away from the mob. He wore a stiff smile the whole time, and he tried his best to not come off overly rude as he politely tried to talk to everyone. Right now he's probably thinking of a way to get his weapon and escape as fast as possible. I laughed as I shook my head. Such was the life of those who wished to stand out. Ignoring the helpless Kevin, I turned my attention towards the sword section in the armory. As I already know what I want, I quickly swiped my card and took a slim and elegant katana. The leather grip comfortably sat on my hands and the cold metal blade directly reflected the lights from the room. Swoosh! Swoosh! Perfect! Lightly swinging the katana a couple of times, I nodded in satisfaction. Its weight was neither too heavy nor too light, and added with its durable blade, which was made of an extremely tough alloy, made the katana a perfect fit for my sword art. Taking the sword with me, I quickly walked out of the room. Since I got everything I wanted, I made my way towards the training ground. A large expansive ground appeared before me as I arrived in the training area. The whole training facility was around the size of 2 football fields. On the top right of the training ground was a shooting range that was split into 5 different distances which ranged from 100 m all the way to 500 m. On the bottom right of the training ground, there were more than a dozen practice dummies that were perfect for close combat practice. The training dummies were made of furlum, an extremely tough metal that could even withstand the impact of an A-rank demon. With its extremely durable body made of furlum, students could train against the dummies without worrying about breaking them. The middle area of the training facility was free for all, meaning that it did not have anything. This was just mainly used to practice moves or footsteps. Basically, it was an area that everyone could use to practice whatever technique they wanted to practice. At the top left, there was a large gym fully equipped with top-of-the-line equipment. Moreover, and most importantly, they had a gravity room that went all the way up to 10G. With the gravity room, one could train and tamper their body with the aid of the room that could increase the gravitational force bearing down on a person. Lastly, at the bottom left of the training ground, a large swimming pool that was 50 meters long appeared before my sight. The swimming pool was one of the most frequented places as it was extremely useful for condition training, as it helped muscles recover faster from fatigue due to the special medical ingredients that were added in the water. Alright, as I told you before, since it's your first day you don't need to force yourself. I'll be here to supervise you all. Gathering everyone's attention, Donna happily smiled as she looked at the training ground. Now go and train. Time waits for no one. Instantly everyone moved. Some directly went to the dummies, while others towards the shooting range. I curiously looked around and found Kevin, Jean, and Melissa heading for the training dummies, while Emma directly went towards the gravity room. On the other hand, Amanda made her way towards the shooting range. As I mentioned before, Kevin's specialty was the sword. Although he still did not practice the Levi Shaw style, his talent for the sword was still unrivaled. If I were to estimate his strength at the moment, I would say even if 50 versions of the current me were to attack him now, he would be able to walk unscathed. Jean, on the other hand, did not use a sword but instead used daggers. He was what you called an assassin type. He was extremely fast and agile, and with his unrivaled speed could cut a person 20 times in a matter of seconds. Melissa, the second ranked in the class, used a spear. She was also incredibly beautiful. Enough to rival both Emma and Amanda, but she was also a lot smarter than them. She had an elegant and beautiful porcelain face that perfectly accompanied her creamy brown hair that gently fell behind her back. Most eye-catching were her exquisite cheeks and rosy moist lips that could tempt any man who saw them. A pair of pure glassy eyes hid underneath thin-framed glasses that put further emphasis on her eyes, enhancing her beauty. Her swan-like slender neck, under which her delicate sexy clavicle and full front that was lightly exposed, only further added to her charm, as her delicate waist and creamy white legs added the finishing touches to her peerless appearance. At the tender age of 12, she was awarded the Humanity Treaty Award, the most notable award for those who achieve outstanding breakthroughs that propel humanity to the next level. Similar to the Nobel Prize back in my world. The reason why she won the award was because she was able to prove the molecular decomposition theorem that stumped a lot of famous scientists all over the world. Her discovery was a major scientific achievement that shook the whole scientific community. With the molecular decomposition theorem, diseases such as cancer that plagued the world were no longer an issue, as this theorem directly tackled the crux of the problem. The only reason she ranked second and not first in the Academy ranking was simply because she was not very strong. Having spent most of her time researching, she did not have much time to improve her skills, and thus why during the admission test her physical score was only slightly above average. But don't get me wrong, that in itself was an achievement, as my score was on the lower side of average. Emma, on the other hand, uses a short sword, and her fighting style was extremely fierce and aggressive. Her fighting style reminded one of a berserker, as she would leave no breathing room for the opponent when she attacked. Honestly, she was probably the one I would least want to fight out of the lot, as it would be extremely troublesome for my cakey style. Lastly, Amanda. She was an archer, a really good one at that. Out of the whole classroom, she was probably the only one who could accurately hit a target positioned 500 meters in the distance. A prodigy that could only be seen every couple of 100 years, was what every professor said about her as they looked at her archery. Those were the main characters. As for me? Well, I'm just gonna practice in the middle area. Since the keiki style was a lost art, even if I practice it, no one would probably notice it. Moreover, the way to practice the keiki style would make one think they were crazy. Closing my eyes, I maximized my concentration. Shing! Shing! In one smooth movement, I took the katana from the scabbard, hacked forward, and placed the katana back into the scabbard. 5 seconds. Shaking my head, I repeated the same motion again. The first movement of the keiki style, quick flash. A one-dimensional slash that could only hit forward with an overwhelming speed that could not be seen by the naked eye. The keiki style only had 5 movements, but each movement was crucial. Each movement was like a piece of a 5-piece puzzle that would later combine and create the true keiki style. For example, right now the first movement was only a single one-dimensional slash forward, while on the other hand, the second movement was a horizontal slash. If the two movements were to be combined together, the range of movement when attacking an enemy would drastically increase. Each movement was designed to add synergy to the other. Once one mastered the keiki style, they would be able to attack wherever they wanted at an unrivaled speed. You could say that the reason why the keiki style was split into 5 forms was because one needed to learn the foundation before practicing the true art. That was the true method of learning the keiki style. Shing! Shing! Without taking a break, I continued repeating the same movement over and over again. According to the memories Master gave me, I can achieve the minor realm of mastery after doing the same movement over 100,000 times. When learning a sword art, there were ways to determine the level of mastery. There was the minor realm of mastery, the great realm of mastery, the essence realm of mastery, and lastly the perfected realm of mastery. Each realm signified a percentage of understanding of the whole sword art. The minor realm of mastery required a 25% understanding of the sword art. The great realm of mastery required a 50% understanding, the essence realm required a 75% understanding, and lastly the perfected realm. The pinnacle of art mastery, with a 100% understanding of the sword art. Currently, my aim was to get all 5 movements up to the minor realms, before later improving them. A relatively handsome man stood at the edge of the training ground. He had dirt blonde hair and carried a noble air around him that reminded people of a high-ranking aristocrat. Turning his head, he looked at the beautiful woman standing next him and asked, "What do you think of this batch?" Staring at the distance, the beautiful woman, who was in fact Donna Longburn, looked around and pointed towards a few individuals. "There are a lot of promising youths, especially in this batch, but the ones that stand out the most to me are Kevin, Jean, Amanda, Emma, Melissa, and Han Yufei." Looking at where Donna pointed, the handsome man thoughtfully nodded. "Well, it isn't surprising considering their lineage." Glancing at the man beside her, Donna scoffed. "I agree, their lineage is indeed impressive, but that's not what makes them great. The blood, sweat and tears they put into their training are what make them this good. Just because they were born with successful parents doesn't mean they will also be successful. Unless you put in the work, no matter how talented you are, you won't ever be strong." Slightly smiling, the man responded, "Well, I wonder about that. Speaking of which, is there anyone you have your eye on?" Without hesitation, Donna responded, "Kevin Voss." Slightly surprised by her quick response, the handsome man seemed to have recollected something, and a trace of coldness appeared in his eyes before it quickly disappeared as if nothing happened. "You mean the kid who set an unprecedented record and firmly took first place in the entrance exam? I'm rather curious about him too. Someone with seemingly no powerful backer managed to come this far. That's rather odd, isn't it?" He dropped subtle hints as he spoke, which made Donna secretly sneer at his attitude. "I was one of the supervisors during the test and was quite impressed by his swordplay. It was elegant and yet had no wasteful movements. I can confidently say that soon enough there will be another S-class in our ranks. Looking at Donna, who didn't even bother hiding her displeasure, the man just smiled and he casually said, "Oh." For the Calamity Witch herself to speak so highly of him, it must mean that he really is a talent to look out for. Glaring at the man beside her, she threatedly spoke. "Gilbert. Call me that one more time and I'll kill you. Just because your father is powerful doesn't mean I won't do anything to you." Hey, I was just joking. You don't have to take it so seriously." Raising his hands in resignation, Gilbert slightly smiled. Humph. Turning her head away, Donna continued watching the training ground. Standing beside her, Gilbert's smile quickly disappeared as he stared at Kevin in the distance. Thereafter his attention quickly shifted towards the middle of the training ground where he saw a lone youth practicing with a katana. PFFFF, who the hell is he? Without even bothering to hide his ridicule, Gilbert laughed as he pointed at the student who was practicing with the katana. Staring in the direction where Gilbert pointed, Donna quickly frowned as she stared at the boy. Taking out her tablet, she quickly scrolled down until a picture resembling the features of the youth appeared. Rank 1750, Rindover. Age 16, son of the Guild Master of Galxicus, a mid-ranged guild operating in Ashton City. Talent Assessment D. Seemingly having understood, he shook his head and gloatingly looked at Donna. "What did I tell you? Only those with a proper bloodline can hope to achieve something. People like him who are born with mediocre parents can never hope to stand at the top with elites like us." Even though Donna wanted to refute, she couldn't. Looking at Rin, who was constantly unsheathing and sheathing the sword, she shook her head in disappointment. What kind of training was that? At least swing your sword instead of just unsheathing and sheathing the sword. Chapter 9, Lock 3. I kind of expected this, but I'm currently being ridiculed by half of the class. As I was practicing the first movement of the keiki style, I couldn't help but notice that some of my classmates were openly pointing their fingers in my direction as they ridiculed me. Hello? I'm fine with you talking smack about me, but at least do it behind my back where I can't hear nor see you. As I tried my best to concentrate, ignoring the ridiculing looks, I couldn't help but notice a tall man with dirt blonde hair standing beside Donna. Instantly cold sweat appeared on my back. Gilbert Von Dexteroy. One of the first antagonists that the protagonist encounters. His father, Thunder God, Maximus von Dexteroy, was one of the only SS rank warriors in the human domain and was currently ranked 3rd in the hero ranking. Moreover, he was also one of the 7 heads of the Union. With such a background, Gilbert could basically do whatever he wanted. This was already shown by how he managed to become an assistant tutor in the academy at the tender age of 22. What especially stood out about Gilbert was not his father's background. No, although his background was indeed terrifying, it wasn't what people paid attention to when interacting with him. What stood out about him was the fact that he was a bloodline supremacist. He believed that only those who had special bloodlines were allowed to stand at the peak. To him, Kevin was an eyesore. Kevin's parents were just regular people with at most AD rank talent. Once they were killed by a demon, he was sent to an orphanage from which he lived there for 5 years. He then later disappeared and reappeared as a prodigy that would make any guild drool at his talent. How could he let Kevin, who had a dirty bloodline, take the spotlight? He was a firm believer that only those who inherited a strong bloodline were destined to reach the peak. He viewed the world like an aristocrat. He firmly believed that commoners had no place in this world, and only nobles could rule the world. So as soon as he heard about Kevin, his first reaction was to remove such cancer that was hiding within the academy. Actually, Gilbert wasn't like this in the past. But whenever Gilbert looked at Kevin, deeply hidden feelings that he tried to forget resurfaced in his mind, making him despise Kevin with all his might. In actuality, his hatred stemmed from a trauma that occurred to him in the past. Back when he first arrived in the lock, he was confident, kind, and well-mannered. However, one day a transfer student came into class. Unlike Gilbert, who was the son of the thunder god Maximus, he was just a regular student with no notable background. At first, Gilbert didn't think too much about him, but slowly the transfer student climbed up the ranks. Startled, Gilbert started to pay more and more attention to the transfer student. Seeing his stunning growth, he was extremely excited. Finally, someone who is worthy to compete with me, he thought, as he trained and studied more than before. Slowly the two started competing in almost every subject, and a friendship slowly blossomed between them. At first, Gilbert always came out on top, but as time passed the gap gradually became smaller and smaller, until the transfer students started winning all their competitions. Shocked by his progress, Gilbert studied and trained even harder. But the results were the same. The gap kept growing bigger and bigger, and a seed of inferiority started to plant inside of his heart. How can I, the son of the thunder god, lose to him who had nothing since birth? Every day he would ask himself the same thing, as he tried his best to bridge the gap between them. At first, it went from wanting to get higher scores than him, to later wanting to be not too far from his score. Gilbert's expectation of himself slowly started becoming lower and lower. All along he kept his feelings hidden inside of him as he continued being friends with the transfer student. Then one day during an excursion, a high-ranked demon attacked. Everyone ran for their lives, Gilbert included. During the chaos, no one noticed one person staying behind. The transfer student. Without a second thought, he chose to fight the demon and buy as much time as possible for his classmates to escape. As Gilbert ran, he quickly noticed his friend's absence. When he turned around, all he saw was his friend desperately fending off the demon. Without a second thought, he tried to help, but he was held back by a teacher and forced to abandon his best friend and rival. When the reinforcements arrived, it was already too late. His best friend and rival had died protecting everyone. As soon as he heard the news, the first thing he felt was a sense of relief. But soon after, as soon as he realized how he felt at his friend's death, deep regret and anguish overcame him. How could he feel relief when his best friend died while saving him and everyone in the class? Although he felt inferior to him, he was like a brother to him. He looked up to him. He cherished him deeply. He was the first true friend he had ever made. He locked himself inside of his room for a month. He started eating less and less, and would always refuse to come out. The situation got so bad that his father was forced to rush back to his son. Everything is up to fate, no matter how talented one is, only the chosen ones get to live on. Those were the words his father coldly told to him as he lectured his son. As his father's words echoed in his ears, Gilbert slowly looked back at his past. His friend was way more talented than him. But in the end, the one that survived was him. In the end, the winner was the one who lived in the end. Slowly weird and twisted ideas started sprouting inside of his mind, almost like a germinating seed. No matter how talented one is, if they are not destined for greatness, they will never reach the top. That's right. So what if he was talented? I am the one who lived in the end. You cannot help but blame your poor birth for your death. You who was not born by a chosen one cannot hope to strive to reach the peak. Soon his thoughts twisted more and more until he became a bloodline supremacist. Although it may have seemed like he was trying to delude himself and find a way to escape reality, in actuality this was all planned by the demons beforehand. His so-called best friend was actually a mole planted by the demons beforehand. Everything till now was a careful scheme done by the demons who were trying to turn Gilbert into their pawn. They first infiltrated his emotions through the use of his best friend. Once his best friend died in a tragic accident, and Gilbert's emotions were unstable. The demons planned to make him digest a demon seed, which essentially corroded a person's mind and turned them into a puppet. Such was their plan, but unfortunately for them, their scheme ended up being exposed by Gilbert's father, who ended all their years of planning. But the damage was already done, as since then Gilbert became a bloodline supremacist. Looking at him from the distance, I couldn't help but pity him. But that doesn't mean I want to talk to him. Hell no. He's probably the person I fear the most in the lock. The reason why I fear him is not because he's some secret boss that is super strong. No. At most he's a medium-level boss, as he is not even that strong. The truly frightening thing about him is the fact that he is a chain villain. What is a chain villain? Chain villains are probably the scariest villains you could possibly create. They are those villains that only bring more trouble as you defeat them. Let me make an example. Let's take a Chinese cultivation novel. Imagine this guy tries to rob you, and you kill him. That's it, right? No. Turns out he is a low-level disciple from a prestigious sect. His senior brother, enraged by his death, hunts you down. What do? You defeat him. What's next? The senior brother's senior brother will hunt you next. This will go on until the situation gets so bad that an elder comes looking for you. Soon you have a fight against the elder, and left with no other option, you defeat him. This will go on until, in the end, you kill the sect leader and remove the whole sect. In the end, because you killed some random person who tried to harm you, you ended up fighting a whole sect. That's what a chain villain was. The most fearsome of all villains in novels. And that's exactly what Gilbert was. And what's especially fearsome about him is that the prestigious sect we are talking about is the Union. The goddamn Union. You want to fight against them? The strongest organization in the human domain? Be my guest, but I'm out. I'm not suicidal. In the novel, Gilbert first uses lackeys to torment the MC. When things don't work out, he tries different methods, such as employing assassins, or using poison. Slowly Kevin finds himself fighting against Gilbert, and as soon as he defeats him, he finds himself in a whole world of trouble as Gilbert's relatives who work in the Union also start targeting him. Slowly Kevin finds himself fighting higher and more executive members in the Union until he has to go toe-to-toe against Thunder God Maximus. At one point things got so bad that he had to leave the human domain so that he could build up strength and take his revenge. Shaking my head, I slowly walk further away from Gilbert. In the end, I spent 2 hours practicing the same movement over and over again. Attention, please. I have observed each and every one of you today. I am pleased by most of you. Of course, not everyone pleased me, as some of you wasted your precious time playing around or were just randomly swinging without aim. I expect better next time. Donna spoke as she briefly glanced at me. And thus, the first training session ended. Hey, why don't you teach me your moves? I don't understand. Why do you keep repeating the same thing over and over again? Are you seeking attention or something? On the way to the dorm, I was harassed by a group of boys who struck up a conversation. I kept ignoring them, but it seemed that it only piqued their interest more. It was only after I ignored them for 5 minutes straight that they left me alone. Actually, the main reason why they stopped was because the main characters just passed by. Kevin, Jean, Amanda, Emma, and Melissa. If it weren't for the fact that Jean was glaring holes at the back of Kevin's head, this could have been a scene straight out of a painting. 2 incredibly handsome boys walking alongside 3 earth-shaking beauties while smiling and chatting amongst each other. Even I didn't expect them to be so handsome and beautiful. As they passed, everyone's sight would turn on them, and people would make way for them. Since I didn't want to stand out, I copied everyone else and moved to the side. As soon as they left, the corridor regained its usual liveliness and I arrived in front of my room. Click! Swiping my card, the door automatically opened for me. Taking off my shoes, I took a quick shower and then went to bed. I had not slept for the past 24 hours and thus was completely exhausted. As soon as my body touched the bed, I passed out. Hey, guys, did you notice how everyone made way for us? It was like a big shot was walking. Cheerfully said Emma, as she looked at the people in front of her. Smiling, Kevin nodded. Yes, I saw. I really didn't expect people to do that. Sneering, Jean looked at Kevin. Humph, of course, you didn't expect that. The only reason they made way for us is because I was present. Hearing Jin's reply, Melissa shook her head and moved 2 steps away from Jean. She hated interacting with stupid people. Amanda, on the other hand, was used to Jin's behavior, hence she didn't react. As both of them came from the first and second-ranked guild respectively, they both had interacted with each other on multiple occasions, hence why she was used to his behavior. Actually, more than didn't react, it was more like she didn't care. As for Emma? She found his response funny, as she tried to hold back her laugh. Smiling wryly, Kevin tried to change the topic. Right, guys, did you notice the guy in the middle who was practicing the katana? Katana? Oh, that weird guy who was unsheathing and sheathing the katana repeatedly? Instantly Emma went beside Kevin as she excitedly started talking. Just like Amanda, Emma did not become an arrogant young master like Jean. She was rather bossy, but most of the time she was cheerful, and always liked to compete. Hence whenever she saw Kevin her competitive spirit would burn, promoting her to interact with him more.
Yeah.
Him. Taken aback by Emma's excitement, Kevin awkwardly nodded. What was his name? Tilting her head, Emma looked around. Amanda was reading her book, so she didn't respond, while Melissa didn't seem to care. Kevin also didn't know his name, so he helplessly shrugged his shoulders. Forget about that loser, and let's head to the cafeteria. I'm starving, said Jean, as he picked up the pace. Hey, wait up, shouted Emma, as she ran to catch up to Jean. Shaking his head helplessly, Kevin also increased his pace as he made his way towards the cafeteria. The only reason why he asked about the katana boy was because his instincts told him he was not as simple as he looked. Forget it, I'm probably imaging things. Like that, Rin managed to avoid a troublesome situation where he would get noticed by the protagonist. Chapter 10, Book 1. Ding dong. Coming. Hurriedly putting on my pants, I made my way towards the door. Opening the door, a man with a blue jacket held onto a large package. Rank 1750, Rendover, package delivery. Handing over the large package, the man held out his tablet and I swiftly signed it. Clack. Closing the door, I curiously pulled the tape off the box. The first thing I saw was a white letter that was neatly nested on top of the other items. Opening the letter, I quickly went through the contents. Equals. Hi Ren. How is school? Have you made any friends yet? When are you coming back home? Come visit us often, your little sister is waiting for you. By the way, I sent some things that you might need. Kiss your one and only beautiful mother. P.S. Daddy also misses you, so work hard. Heart emoji, heart emoji, heart emoji. Equals. Yes, I in fact did reincarnate to overly protective parents. During the time I was in Clayton Ridge, I would occasionally receive texts from them, and whenever I texted back, the response would always come within seconds. Most of the time they would just randomly text me the weirdest thing or nag about how I should train more so that I would one day take over the guild. I can't say I hated this feeling though. As my family left me early in my previous life, I had long lost familial warmth. Now that I have it back, I don't want to part ways with it. Opening the box, I quickly separated things into two piles. Useless and useful. Although I have only known my family for a week, I can already tell from what I've seen so far that they've definitely sent junk. And I was exactly right. The first thing I pulled was a large shirt that said Mama's Boy on it. Like hell, I'm wearing this. Throwing the shirt at the useless pile, I quickly checked the rest of the content. There were many things packed inside, from bags to clothes and other useful things that could be of use to me later on. Slowly I separated the useful and useless stuff that my mom sent. Phew. That should be it. Wiping off the sweat that had accumulated on my forehead, I stood up and lazily stretched my arms. Just as I was about to leave, I caught a glimpse of something inside the box from the corner of my eye. A book? Looking at the last thing inside of the box, I couldn't help but be confused. It was a red book with no cover or illustration on the front. From what I've observed so far, whomever Rendover was before I took over, was definitely not a book lover. In fact, it seemed that he hated reading, as my new mother seemed to have been really surprised when I asked her for some books. She wanted to send me a congratulatory gift for managing to enroll in the lock, and as I don't necessarily know them that well, I only asked them for a couple of books as a gift. Flipping through the book, I was left speechless as there was nothing written in the book. It was completely blank. Perhaps it's a diary. I thought as I threw the book into the useless pile. Makes more sense now. Glancing around the room, I checked the time. It was around 6 in the afternoon. Gurgle. I guess I'll head to the canteen first, and then I'll go to the gym after that. Seeing how my stomach was growling in hunger, I decided to go to the canteen to eat some food before heading to the gym. Packing up my bag, I took the keys and swiftly left the room. Click. With a click, the door closed, and I left for the canteen. As I left, inside of the room, engravings started to appear on an inconspicuous red book that sat on top of a pile of junk in the corner of the room. The Luminescent Swordsman. I gotta say, the food in the canteen was amazing. I only spent 15 U and I got a meal that would have made it into the Michelin list back in my world. It was that good. After indulging myself a bit more, I quickly made my way towards the training ground. As I arrived at the training grounds, I couldn't help but once again be impressed by the facility. Even though I had already been here today, because I was too tired, I didn't really have a good look at the facility. Just how much did they spend on this? I couldn't even fathom how much money was poured into creating this facility. The amount of money needed to create such an environment would be well over a couple of billion U. The gravity room itself cost around 50 million U, and here they have a whopping 5 of them. In hindsight, it is sort of understandable as to why they would invest so much in this facility. Although they were teenagers, they were all future pillars that would help protect humanity from the demon invasion. Why wouldn't humanity invest in them? If they wanted to maximize their speed of progress, such a facility was needed. It was around 1900 hours and the facility was mostly empty. But just because the facility was empty, it didn't mean that it was always going to be like this. In the future, there will be lots more people using the training facility. It was just because today was the first day that barely anyone was present in the facility. Most of them were hanging out with their new buddies they made today or were just too tired to train. Because of my relatively low ranking, not a lot of people wanted to associate with me, hence why I have nothing better to do than just train. Well, I couldn't complain, as I liked being by myself. Clang! 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 As I was stretching, in the corner of the room I could hear the sound of metal clashing against metal. Without even needing to look, I knew who it was. Kevin. Like all protagonists, he was a training fanatic and trained more than 8 hours a day. Just seeing his work ethic made me speechless. How in the world am I gonna catch up to him when he's constantly training every day? Letting out a sigh, I took out my katana and started practicing. Swish. Swish. Walking along the corridor, Donna checked the time on her tablet. She just got off a meeting and was quite tired. Thinking back at the meeting that she had just attended, Donna couldn't help but slightly curse at those old foxes for continuously wasting her time with those pointless meetings. Most of the meeting time was wasted in discussions regarding the budget allocation and which subject should have their budget increased and which one should have it lowered. After 1 hour of pointless arguing, Donna couldn't take it anymore and excused herself. As she was walking, she briefly glanced at the window which directly faced the training ground. The first thing that caught her sight was the figure of a handsome boy gracefully sparring against one of the training dolls. It was truly a mesmerizing sight. Even Donna got lost in the sight for a couple of seconds before snapping out of it. How interesting! She couldn't explain why, but whenever she saw that boy's swordplay she would occasionally get mesmerized. Since the first time she laid eyes on him, she started paying close attention to him. She could tell from a glance that he was going to make it big in the future. Swiping the card that led to the training facility, she entered. It was only after she entered the training facility that she noticed another student practicing his swings. At first, she was delighted. As a teacher, who doesn't like it when their student works hard? But as she saw his weird movements, she was reminded of the boy she saw at the training session today. He's still wasting time doing that nonsense? Shaking her head, she moved to where Kevin was. I have to say, whenever I see your swordsmanship I can't help but get mesmerized by it. Startled, Kevin stopped what he was doing and looked at the enchanting figure that was gracefully walking towards his direction. Miss Donna? Why are you here? Why can't I be here? Tilting her head sideways, she teasingly looked at Kevin, who was sweating all over. You know, it's good that you're practicing against the dolls, but you should stop that for now. Sorry? Looking at Donna in confusion, Kevin lowered his sword. From what I observed, your body can't keep up with your brain. Taking out her tablet, she quickly swiped up and a holographic image of the dummy appeared before her. When you were sparring, I observed that your body has a hard time following where your eyes look. Here, have a look at this. Using her tablet, she quickly tapped on the practice dummy before her. Instantly several red spots appeared on the holographic image, with numbers hovering above them. These dummies not only are extremely durable but they also have state-of-the-art technology installed in them. They can measure the amount of strength you exert, how fast your blows are, and how accurate they are. Truly an amazing piece of engineering. Pointing directly at the numbers above the red dots, Donna looked at Kevin. You see this? This number tells you how accurate your blows are. Right now your highest number is 85%. Although the 15% you missed may be as small as a millimeter, it could dictate whether you kill your enemy or not. Swiping to the right, a small detailed table appeared in front of Kevin. Several numbers were displayed before him, revealing how much power he used when he attacked the dummy, and how consistent he was every time. Using state-of-the-art eye-tracking software, we can directly predict where you will hit. Not only does it take your line of sight into consideration, but it also reads your body language, such as which direction your body is facing, the angle at which you are swinging, and many other considerable factors that can accurately determine where you will hit. The numbers that are currently displayed measure the level of accuracy your hits have when taking into account all those factors previously mentioned. Staring at the table for a while, Kevin let out a long breath and looked at Donna. Then what should I do? What should you do? It's actually not that difficult of a problem. Pointing at the gravity room on the other side of the training facility, she said. I recommend you tamper your body inside of the gravity room so that your body can keep up with your brain. Understood. Wiping off the sweat that had accumulated on his body, he thanked Donna for her advice and quickly made his way towards the gravity room. Seeing how determined Kevin was, Donna couldn't help but let out a satisfied smile. Now it's the problem child's turn. Turning her head, her sight quickly drifted towards the boy who was mindlessly sheathing and unsheathing his katana. Hey, you! Seeing how he was mindlessly doing the same thing, Donna couldn't take it anymore and made her way towards him. Question mark. Tilting his head sideways, the young boy looked in the direction of where the voice came. Immediately his whole body froze, as beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Looking at him, Donna actually found the scene rather funny. Glancing at the boy up and down, Donna scrutinized the boy before her. Jet black hair, crystal blue eyes, and well-defined features. His body was on the skinnier side, but he was definitely not ugly. Well, as she looked at him, she couldn't help but recall Jean and Kevin, which made her bitterly smile. There was simply no comparison. Tell me what you're doing? Miss Donna, I am practicing. You call that practicing? Sighing, she looked at the boy and said in an annoyed tone. Look, mindlessly sheathing and unsheathing the sword like that is utterly stupid. What can you hope to achieve by doing that? Scratching his head embarrassedly, the boy's eyes shifted to the side as he spoke in a barely audible voice. You see, whenever I try to pull out my katana it would always get stuck inside my scabbard, and it happens quite often so. As Donna was a superhuman blessed with mana, it wasn't hard for her to make out what the boy was saying. But when she heard what he said, she wished she hadn't. Sword stuck inside of the scabbard? How can you make such a stupid mistake? No. In the first place, how can someone who can't even pull out a katana from the scabbard be able to enroll in the lock? Millions of questions emerged in her mind as she speechlessly looked at the boy before her.
Ha!
Just get a better scabbard or change sword. Stop wasting your time like this, okay? Okay. Feeling like she would get a massive headache if she stayed any longer, she turned around and left. Just as she was about to leave the facility, she took a quick peek behind her. She was left speechless once again. Is he deaf or something? The same boy she just talked to was doing the same thing again. It was like her advice never entered his ears. Fine, suit yourself, if that's how you want to play I'm fine with it. It's not like it was her duty to personally supervise him. He was already 16 years old, his life was his responsibility. She had already taken her time off work to give him advice, but he decided to ignore it. Her job was to guide students, and if those students ignored her guidance it was up to them, not her. As she left, she directly put Rin on her blacklist.